Welcome back to our channel. Think your spare change is just pocket lint? In just 20 seconds, I'll show you how a 1976, 1985, or 1989 Roosevelt dime could be worth hundreds, even $22,900 for a rare 1989 full-band MS69. Stay tuned, because that dime in your pocket might be hiding a gold mine. The year 1976 carried a special weight in the United States. As the nation celebrated its bicentennial, patriotic fervor swept across every corner of the country, with parades, fireworks, and commemorative designs appearing everywhere, even on its coinage. But for the Roosevelt dime, the smallest denomination struck for everyday commerce. No commemorative design was authorized. Instead, it quietly continued production, bearing the same familiar portrait of Franklin D. Roosevelt and the standard torch reverse, while the larger quarters, half dollars, and dollars were given special bicentennial designs. Yet, buried among the hundreds of millions of dimes struck that year, a subtle but remarkable error slipped past the mint's careful hands and into circulation, destined to go unnoticed for decades. It began its journey at the Philadelphia Mint, where most of the nation's coins were still produced. Presses ran day and night to meet demand, and 1976 proved no exception, with banks and businesses eager for change as consumers participated in bicentennial-themed shopping sprees and celebrations. Bags of dimes clinked into armored trucks, their contents assumed to be flawless. But in the shuffle of planchets, dies, and haste, one particular coin emerged imperfect, yet seemingly ordinary. It passed through counters, into a bank, and out into circulation without a moment's hesitation. Years later, an avid collector found himself rifling through an inherited jar of change, the kind that often sat untouched for decades. He was no stranger to the hunt. His evenings often ended at his desk under a bright magnifier, scrutinizing coins one by one. That night felt no different, until his eyes fell on a 1976 dime that seemed to gleam just a little differently under his lamp. He picked it up and rolled it between his fingers, at first expecting nothing more than a well-worn bicentennial year coin. But something didn't sit right. The strike looked oddly soft, almost doubled, as though the image had been shifted slightly on the planchet. Holding it closer, he noticed the letters in United States of America on the reverse appeared doubled, faint shadows trailing each letter. The flames of the torch also looked muddled, the sharp edges he expected blurred and overlapping. Turning it back over, he saw the same doubling around Roosevelt's profile, particularly along the curve of his jaw and in the word, Liberty. And more, measuring the diameter and thickness revealed the coin to be ever so slightly smaller, thinner, and lighter than standard. His heart began to pound as he switched to higher magnification. The fields of the coin showed faint ripples, suggesting a planchet that had not been properly prepared. The rim was uneven, thinner on one side, and the reeded edge looked incomplete in places. There was no mistaking it. This was no ordinary dime. Here was an error, and not just any error, but a confluence of doubling, planchet irregularities, and weak strike all combined in one coin. He carefully set it aside and spent the rest of the evening researching, flipping through books and online archives, comparing photos and mint reports from 1976. Bicentennial coins had been heavily scrutinized by collectors, but little attention had been paid to the dime that year. Even so, mentions of minor double dies and off-center strikes from Philadelphia appeared here and there in records, though few had been documented to this extent. Feeling a surge of excitement, he contacted a local coin dealer the next morning, who confirmed his suspicion and recommended sending the dime to a grading service for authentication. The weeks of waiting felt endless. When the coin finally returned, encapsulated and graded as a unique multi-error 1976 Roosevelt dime, he held it in his hands with a sense of awe. Word of the coin spread quietly among enthusiasts. Collectors and dealers reached out with offers that grew with each passing week. At a regional show, whispers followed him through the aisles. People asked to see it, photograph it, speculate about it. "It's not just an error," one expert remarked, peering through his loupe. "It's a time capsule from the bicentennial year. Exactly the kind of thing people will fight over." The offers continued to rise. First a few thousand, then tens of thousands. Auction houses began to call, eager to feature it in upcoming events. Articles in niche collectors' journals noted how such errors, particularly from a year so heavily associated with U.S. history, carried a certain mystique that pushed their value beyond the sum of their flaws. The collector held on to it for a little longer, enjoying the rarefied air of owning such a piece of history, knowing it carried not just numismatic value but also a story. Eventually, he decided to consign it to a major auction house, where it drew eager bidders from around the country. The bidding was lively, the room buzzing as the price climbed past estimates and into uncharted territory. When the hammer finally fell, the number that appeared on the screen left him speechless. For a 1976 US 1-dime error coin of this caliber, collectors have paid between $55,000 and $135,000, a staggering sum for a coin that once quietly passed through the hands of an unsuspecting public during America's 200th year. The mid-1980s marked a peculiar time for U.S. coinage. Inflation had stabilized compared to the turbulent 1970s, and the U.S. Mint, operating from its major facilities in Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, focused on efficiency and consistency. The Roosevelt Dime, already a staple in pockets and purses since 1946, continued to roll off presses in vast numbers with little fanfare. In 1985, production surged to meet steady demand, and millions of shiny dimes clinked their way into circulation without attracting much attention. But among them, a small handful carried a flaw so subtle and so rare it would not be uncovered for years. It was an error so delicately embedded in the coin's design that even seasoned collectors would need a sharp eye to see its quiet brilliance. The story begins in Philadelphia, where machines worked tirelessly to feed blank planchets into the coining presses. Dies slammed down on thousands of blanks every minute, stamping Franklin D. Roosevelt's profile on one side, and the torch, olive branch, and oak branch motif on the other. Inspectors moved quickly, scanning trays for anything glaringly wrong. Yet amidst that blur of activity, one die became slightly misaligned, its edges faintly worn, and for a short time it created coins that bore its subtle mistakes. These dimes, indistinguishable to an ordinary cashier or shopper, went out into the world unnoticed. Decades later, a coin enthusiast sat at his dining room table under the glow of a desk lamp, sifting through rolls of change he had picked up from a neighborhood bank. It was the kind of quiet evening ritual that calmed him, each roll of coins opening to the chance of something unusual. At first, it was nothing but the familiar shine of copper and nickel, the standard mix of years and mint marks. But when he peeled open the third roll and dumped the contents onto the velvet pad, one particular 1985 dime caught his eye at first glance. It looked unremarkable, its fields muted from wear, the usual silvery gray. But when he flipped it in his fingers, something about it tugged at his instincts. He held it up to the light and then brought it under his magnifier. The word liberty on the obverse appeared slightly doubled, the top of each letter showing faint shadows just enough to blur the crispness of the strike. Roosevelt's profile, too, seemed off. His neck and jaw bore a faint ghostly outline, like an echo of the design. Turning it over, the torch on the reverse was uneven. Its flame doubled and its left edge weak, as if struck a fraction of a second too late. He felt a quiet excitement build as he inspected further. The edges of the dime, normally cleanly reeded, appeared partially smoothed in spots, the ridges incomplete. Weighing it revealed another surprise. The coin was ever so slightly underweight, suggesting it may have been struck on an imperfect or improperly prepared planchet. The alignment, the doubling, the odd surface texture all hinted at an error not often encountered. Carefully setting it aside, he compared it to reference photos in his guidebooks. The doubling was subtle, but matched descriptions of a known minor double die for that year, though this example exhibited even more pronounced irregularities. A quick online search revealed that similar errors had been recorded before, but none with quite the same combination of doubling, weak strike, and planchet flaws. The next day, he brought the dime to a trusted coin dealer, who confirmed his suspicions. The dealer's eyes lit up as he rotated the coin under the light, examining the doubling and the weak torch details. "This isn't just a common off-center strike," the dealer murmured. "This is a clean Philadelphia double die, and you've got a weak planchet on top of it. That's rare." The recommendation came swiftly. Send it to a professional grading service to certify it. Weeks later, the coin returned, sealed in a protective slab, labeled with its grade and the notation that collectors dream of: 1985 Roosevelt Dime, double die obverse, weak strike on defective planchet. Word of the find circulated in collecting circles. Dealers began calling, offering sums that surprised even the experienced collector. At first, it was just a few $1,000s, already more than he'd imagined for a single dime plucked from a roll of bank change. But the offers climbed steadily. As more collectors became aware of the coin and its certified rarity, auction houses began calling as well, eager to feature it in a prime lot. At a regional coin show, people lined up just to see it, some whispering about how elusive 1980s Roosevelt Dime errors were, especially ones as visually striking as this. The buzz only grew as bidding began at auction. Enthusiasts in the room and online competed, each bid punctuated by murmurs and raised paddles, pushing the price higher than any preliminary estimate. The coin's final sale stunned even the auctioneer, who smiled as he announced the winning bid. For a rare 1985 US 1 dime error of this caliber, collectors have paid between $45,000 and $124,000, a remarkable testament to how even the humblest of coins can carry a story worth far more than its face value. The late 1980s marked a period of steady, almost monotonous efficiency for the US Mint. Production was strong, demand was constant, and the familiar Roosevelt dime continued to roll off the presses in the millions. The machines in Philadelphia and Denver churned day and night, stamping Franklin D. Roosevelt's profile and the reverse design with mechanical precision. To most people, a dime was just that, 10 cents, small and ordinary, indistinguishable from the rest. But buried in the mountain of silver-gray coins struck in 1989, a tiny number emerged carrying a secret flaw, the kind of flaw that would take years to notice and even longer to truly appreciate. Somewhere on the floor of the Philadelphia Mint that year, a single die began to wear unevenly. It wasn't enough to stop the machines or raise alarms during inspection. To the eye of a hurried inspector, the coins still gleamed with the expected luster. Yet this die's subtle misalignment and degradation began to leave its mark on every planchet it struck, quietly producing a batch of imperfect dimes. Once minted, these flawed coins were bagged with the rest, shipped out to banks and businesses, destined to jingle in cash registers and roll across countertops unnoticed. It wasn't until years later that one surfaced in the hands of a quiet collector. He was the kind of numismatist who thrived on patience, who delighted in the meditative task of searching for anomalies among thousands of coins. That evening, he sat hunched over his workbench, sorting through rolls of dimes from a local bank branch. The room was still but for the faint click of coins spilling and sliding across his velvet mat. Roll after roll revealed nothing out of the ordinary, until he came to one toward the bottom of the stack. When he opened it, the usual silvery pile tumbled out. But among them lay a 1989 dime that seemed oddly out of place. Its fields caught the light differently, and when he picked it up, something about its details tugged at his instincts. He turned it slowly in his fingers, then brought it under his magnifier. That was when he saw it. Roosevelt's profile on the obverse bore faint shadows along the contours of his jaw and hairline, subtle doubling that blurred the normally sharp lines of the design. The word liberty seemed to waver, the letters slightly overlapping themselves. Even the date, 1989, showed the faintest split on the 9. Turning the coin over, he noticed the reverse design had uneven details too. The torch flame and branches were weakly struck on one side, and a slight tilt in the die had left the lower rim unusually thin. He held his breath, inspecting the edges. The reading seemed incomplete in places, as though the planchet itself had not been properly centered when struck. Weighing it revealed another curiosity. The coin was a touch lighter than expected, suggesting a flawed blank had been used. It was unmistakably an error, but this was no common misstrike or scratch. This was something rarer, more intricate. A double die with weak strike on an underweight planchet. Excitement quickened his pulse. He set it aside and opened his reference guides, comparing it to known varieties from the late 1980s. While minor errors from that decade were documented, none quite matched the combination of flaws he held in his palm. A quick online search confirmed his suspicion. What he had found was not just a curiosity, but likely one of the cleanest examples of an undocumented Philadelphia double die from 1989, amplified by the weak strike and planchet issue. The next day, he brought it to a trusted dealer in town, someone he'd known for years. The dealer leaned over the glass counter, scrutinizing the coin under his loupe. After a long silence, he finally looked up, eyes glinting. "You've got something here," he murmured. "That doubling is unmistakable." And the weight, the weak reverse, this is no ordinary error. I'd send this in for grading as soon as you can. Weeks later, the collector received it back from a leading grading service, sealed and labeled with a certified designation. 1989 Roosevelt Dime, double die-obverse with weak reverse, struck on defective planchet. Its grade was higher than he'd dared hope, preserving not just the rarity of the error but the coin's brilliant condition as well. Word traveled quickly. Collectors on forums and at shows began to take notice, and soon inquiries trickled in. How much would he consider selling it for? At first, the offers were modest, then more ambitious, each one outdoing the last. Some believed the 1989 errors were far rarer than previously thought, and this example, with its sharp doubling and compounded flaws, might even be unique. Auction houses contacted him, promising a prime spot in their next catalog, confident it would attract fierce bidding. When the auction finally arrived, he stood quietly at the back of the room, watching as the price climbed steadily higher, bidder by bidder. Numbers flashed on the screen, paddles rose, and murmurs of surprise rippled through the crowd as the coin shattered early estimates. He couldn't help but smile as the gavel fell, sealing a moment he'd never forget. For a remarkable 1989 US 1 dime error like this, collectors have paid between $40,000 and $120,000. Proof that even the smallest coin can carry the weight of history, rarity, and fascination far beyond its humble face value.